Chapter 14. Vanessa nearly cried when the rain first started. It came after hours of walking the shore of Nowhere Island, looking for some sign of Carter and Jane. She and Buzz stopped long enough to stand on the bench at the beach with their mouths open, letting the drops moisten their dry tongues and throats. It wasn't much, but the relief was intense. Soon they were up in the woods, where rain had started to gather on the thick foliage. It was Buzz's idea, something that he had seen on one of his shows. If someone had told her a month earlier that she was going to be licking plants for water, Vanessa would have thought that they were crazy. Now the only thing that was crazy was how good it felt to lap up a tiny bit of moisture from a waxy green leaf in the middle of the jungle. Still, the good feelings didn't last long. As darkness set in, there was no choice but to head back to the boat. They'd missed their chance for Lookout Point, too. Even if they could get through the jungle at night, they wouldn't be able to see anything until morning. "We'll go first thing," Vanessa said. "We'll find them, Buzz, I promise." Buzz only nodded. This seemed to be weighing even more heavily on him than it was on her. And the hard truth was, they were still going to have to worry about water no matter what happened. That meant collecting as much of this rain as they could right away. As soon as they reached the Lucky Star, Vanessa went straight downstairs to grab whatever containers that she could find. She pulled a cooking pot and a frying pan out of the galley, and she set them up on the deck. And then she ran down for more. "Buzz, where are you? What are you doing?" She yelled. There was no knowing how long this rain would last. When she came back up with the flashlight and an armful of cracked coffee mugs, Buzz was standing on the cabin roof. He was trying to free what was left of the torn mainsail from what was left of the broken boom. "Help me get this off," he said. "We can tie it across the deck and catch water with it." Vanessa looked at her baby brother. It was a brilliant idea, one that she never would have thought of. She set down the mugs and she jumped up next to him. They worked as quickly as they could, untying the links of cord and cutting through the knots with a steak knife from down below. By the time that they had freed up the sail, they had an enormous parachute-sized piece of material to work with. "Over here," Buzz said. "Quick!" Following his lead, Vanessa helped stretch the sail across the back of the boat. They tied it to the rail on two sides and to the captain's wheel in the cockpit. When they were done, the whole thing hung loosely over the deck like a giant cloth bowl. A small pool had already started to collect in the center. "Buzz, you are some kind of genius," Vanessa said, standing with him in the pouring rain. "Did you see that on TV also?" "No," Buzz said. "I saw it on a video game." Buzz shook his head. "It was just something I thought of," he said. It seemed like he didn't want to talk about it. Vanessa felt pretty sure that he was already back to thinking about Carter and Jane, back to worrying too. Still, she couldn't help noticing that Buzz was adapting to all of this faster than anyone. Maybe he was going to surprise them all before it was over. In fact, he already had. Jane shivered in the dark as the rain poured down on their little sandbar. It didn't matter if the tide had gone out now or not. Without any moonlight or even starlight to navigate by, there was no way to leave. The darkness was completely here, like the definition of pitch black. At first, the rain was a good thing. They'd lain flat on their backs, catching what they could in their mouths and in some of the jars they brought. She still had her pack, but Carter's was gone. They only had half as many containers as when they started. And now, hours later, the rain was just one more torment to deal with. If Jane had wondered how things could get worse since the crash, this was her answer. "What time do you think it is?" she asked Carter. "I don't know," Carter answered dully. It was the same voice he used whenever one of his teams lost a game. I think the sun comes up around 6, she said. Whatever, he answered, and he hunched his shoulders a little tighter. Besides everything else, the hunger, the rain, the darkness, Jane was also chilled to the bone. She and Carter huddled together on the sand for warmth, and she tried to use her empty pack as a blanket, but none of it did any good. Their one lucky break was that the water had stopped rising before it swallowed their tiny island completely. Carter! What? Do you think Vanessa and Buzz are looking for us? Oh, they'd be stupid if they were, he said. They should just wait until we come back tomorrow. Jane hugged herself and tried to stop shivering. Do you think it's at least midnight by now? She said. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Okay. Instead, she shut her eyes and thought about that word tomorrow. Hopefully the sun would come up extra early in the morning. She imagined it rising over the cliffs and shining warmly down on her face. Then slowly the image faded and another one took its place. She saw her mother and Eric now. They were standing on the front porch of the house waving at her to run up the sidewalk and come inside. That part was the hardest of all, thinking about home, their kitchen full of food, her warm bed, her friends. All of it was 5,000 impossible miles away. Even getting a hug from her mother right now would have been like winning some kind of prize. But still, Jane was determined not to cry, especially in front of Carter. At least not until she saw the sun again. Then she could do whatever she wanted, she told herself. In the meantime, she just had to hang on. Buzz took the first watch that night. He let Vanessa get some sleep, and he stood on the deck in the rain, in his raincoat, watching the dark beach. He kept the flashlight, too. He pointed it up the shore and clicked the button on and off, on and off, on and off. Every minute or so, he repeated the pattern. The beam didn't reach far, but it was something Carter and Jane could follow if they were trying to get back this way. It was also something Buzz could do. He had a terrible, helpless feeling in his gut, wondering where they'd gone. It kept reminding him of what Jane had said that morning. I think we should stick together. Now he wished more than anything that he would have listened. They all should have. Maybe Jane was the littlest, but she was probably the smartest one in the group, because right now, letting those two go off by themselves felt like the stupidest mistake that they could have possibly made.